So I'd like to introduce to you our next two presenters. Tucker Lucas is from Fargo. He works at Sundog Interactive. He's worked on several film projects, and in fact, last year at this year's Film Fest here, we showed his mock documentary, First Mow. Craig Carlson is a director of film studies at Concordia College in Moorhead. Greg is well known throughout the festival circuit as well, since several of his works have been shown around the country. He's also on one of the committee members of the Fargo Film Festival, and he has worked on a project over there that has kind of exploded, and he'll talk about that after a while on the 2-Minute Film Festival, they'll talk about that after that. Right now, we would like to have them come out and talk about Mocs and Docs, the techniques for creating mock documentaries and documentaries. So Chris Tucker and Craig Carlson.
Okay. Did you ever have a good time so far today? You've been like super patient and really an amazing audience for all these, like having things presented at you one thing after another. So we're the lucky ones who get to be last when you're tired and ready to leave.
And we know that things are kind of going a little bit long, so we're going to try to keep it a little bit shorter than we originally planned. So we can make sure you guys keep to your schedules that you have to keep to today.
So one of the things that Tucker and I do is compete in limited time movie making competitions like the 48-hour film project. And one of my favorites is the International Documentary Challenge, which we've done twice. And so we're going to show you, actually you get a sneak preview of a movie that we made in 5 days in March that will premiere next week in Toronto at Hot Docs as one of the 12 finalists of the 300 International Doc Challenge entries. And it's called The Hammer and the Axe. So we're going to take a look at that because we want to show you a couple of films to kind of set the context. So we'll watch Hammer and the Axe right now. It's 5 minutes.
How long that would be?
Yeah.
How to wedge it?
Sure.
What does the shape mean for what we can cut?
My name is Doug Swenson. I'm a blacksmith.
My name is Tim Jorgensen, and I'm a blacksmith's apprentice.
I grew up on a farm. My great-grandfather had been a blacksmith. We still had a few of his old tools. And when I was about 8 years old, I actually rebuilt a forge that we had there, and I started to use it at that point, pretty much on my own. I don't know, it was just meant to be. A lot of people come to you and they say, oh, this is so neat. You know, you should, if I could learn this, if you could teach me this, can you teach me how to make a sword? 99% of people are going to come and say, I want to make a sword. Tim came at it with a totally different approach, you know, in terms of really learning the basics and, you know, progressing through the different techniques and then putting it to an entirely different use. You know, it's interesting the differences in the shape of the eyes, you know, from this, you know, to this.
Right.
See, and most of these are, you know, that
just a sort of oval.
oblong oval. This is almost a D shape.
Yeah, we should maybe look at making a D drift sometime. And then
Yeah.
That's that.
That's all.
If there's one secret behind the curtain to blacksmithing, I would say it's to get your iron out before it burns up. The phrase, too many irons in the fire, and that phrase is there for a reason. if you're not paying attention to what you're doing, it's going to go. The sort of red to the orange and getting into yellow and then almost a white yellow. And what that means in terms of what's happening to your metal, it means it's time to think about not staring at it anymore and getting busy with the hammer. The hammer can do plenty in itself in terms of driving nails and driving chisels, and these are the things that remove wood and give things their aesthetic. And the axe will do the same thing. So the axe will split wood, and the axe will shape wood. It'll make ships, and it'll split heads.
You could choke up on the handle a bit and use it as a single handed axe, or you could really get a hold of that with both hands and really go to town on something.
Right.
It's a kind of an aspect that's a little bit mysterious to most people, is to be able to create something basically from nothing.
Do you burn anything in particular in there?
I'm burning some very nice ash wood in there right now.
He's a great teacher. I like to bring up historical evidence, and he likes to bring up metallurgy, and we see how they work together. We're both very easygoing. I don't recall ever having an argument. My dad died in 1991, and so I don't have that interaction with, I guess, things I would like to ask him about. My dad didn't keep a journal. It's not like I can look in there and say, here's a tip for when you turn 40, keep an eye on this. I can just say, Doug, when I turn 40, what's going to happen? And so these are the things we talk about at the forge, over the fire, and I think it's great to have his input. The hammer and the axe, for me, as basic as they are to history, I think were really rewarding and informative, and should be considered works of art to some extent. You get a lot more respect after you learn how to make them, but also the tools you need to make in order to make them. The punch and the drift have to come before you can make the hammer and the axe.
Can you guys hear me a little bit better now? Working better? All right, sounds awesome. Sounds good. So that was The Hammer and the Axe. That was a documentary that Greg and I worked on for the IDC, like he just said. Sort of a leading example as we talk about sort of what is a documentary first before we move on for the rest of it. So, Greg, if you could maybe lead us through what is it that makes a movie a documentary versus, say, what we're used to, which is maybe a narrative, and what are some good examples of that?
Yeah, it's kind of a loaded question because I think all films are constructed, so whether you're calling it fiction or nonfiction, you as the filmmaker are making choices about what your audience is going to see, how long they're going to see it, from what angle. All of that stuff is part of storytelling. So really, documentary and non-documentary films are visual narratives, as far as I'm concerned. But I think we can sort of settle on the idea that there's some. It's intended to be a non-fiction presentation of some aspect of reality. There's a couple of quotations there from some kind of heavy hitters in the evolution of the documentary form, going all the way back to Grierson, who I think kind of coined the term documentary back in the 1920s.
And how much would you say when, especially since we have a lot of filmmakers in the audience here, and they are documentarians, a lot of them are, at what point does them sort of coming in and putting a camera in the environment of whoever it is that they're documenting, is that something they should be concerned about as far as, changing what it is that they're actually documenting, if you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, well, that's kind of another fun part of talking the film theory, which I like to do with people, and the notion of, a kind of application of Heisenberg's uncertainty principle, the act of photographing something changes the thing which is being photographed. And so, keeping that in mind, that that your presence there, even if you have all the necessary permissions and the release forms and the willing participation of all the people who are involved, you're gonna get something different from no matter how tightly you script it and storyboard it.
Yeah, and actually the example you have up here is actually a really interesting example of a documentary having an effect on its subject sort of after the fact, if you want to talk about
Absolutely, yeah. I chose there's a couple stills here I'm gonna flip through that indicate some films that were really influential on me, and thought if some of you have not seen these movies, you should track them down and watch them. They're all available to see. The Thin Blue Line was directed by Errol Morris, who's kind of a modern master of the documentary form, and this movie was responsible for helping get convicted murderer off of death row. It was a crime he did not commit. And the techniques that Morris used in this film, including reenactments, have been adopted by modern crime television shows, and it's widely considered one of the most influential contemporary documentaries. I'll click through here, and okay, there's the King of Kong. We put this one in here because it's so much fun. It's a great underdog story.
Has anyone here seen this?
A few people.
We need to get way more hands so that you guys need to check out this movie. It is awesome. It is awesome. Right on, dude. It is awesome.
Share it with your friends. Even if you don't like video games, it's such a perfect depiction of the David and Goliath kind of archetype or trope. I chose The Arbor. It's probably quite a bit less seen than the other films in the group, but Cleo Bernard, the filmmaker, she came out of the art world and installation art, and she uses techniques in this film that I had not seen a documentary filmmaker use. She has original audio recordings from family members of the playwright Andrea Dunbar, who died young and had a really difficult life and difficult upbringing. And she hired professional actors to listen to the audio recordings over and over and over until they had the cadences memorized so they could lip sync. She would set up the camera and the actors would lip sync over the authentic original audio recordings, and then she would stage these amazing tableaux in the background, like this bed on fire in the shot that you see here. And I had never seen anything quite like that, and I thought, is this documentary? Is it something else? It opened up ideas about what nonfiction filmmaking could be for me, and that kind of leads right into a film that was notorious last year, The Act of Killing, Josh Oppenheimer's movie about the 1965-66 Indonesian death squads, and he makes the main characters of the film the actual men who committed these atrocities, as they kind of do Hollywood recreations of their crimes as a way to sort of process what they did all those decades ago. And it's unsettling and kind of ethically challenging, and it's another movie that blends fact and fiction. Yeah. So should we take a look at the mock now?
What we'll do is we'll give sort of an example of a mockumentary now and talk about that before we get to techniques. The example we're going to give is a movie I made in 2010 called First Mow. It played here last year at the film festival. Just in short, a mockumentary is what it sounds like. It's sort of a parody of a documentary style. And this one happens to be about a man who absolutely loves to mow his lawn. So we'll watch that and we'll come back for some more.
My name is Mark Schlater. I'm from Hudson, Wisconsin, and today I'm going to mow my lawn. The first mow of the year to me is really important. It's a big deal for me, and it's a big deal for the lawn. I've been raking and picking up twigs and just getting, the lawn prepped for this. It gets me mentally ready for the rest of summer, and it gets the lawn physically ready to be able to take the beating that I have in store for it. I've got the Briggs & Stratton Rally 20-inch. It's not the newest, it's not the biggest and best model, but for me, well, it's my best model because I really like to get a feel of the grass and the lay of the land myself. I get to feel the contours, and I know when and where I really need to dip that mower in to cut all the grass as evenly as I possibly can.
My name is Emily Camp. I'm Mark's girlfriend, and I've been living here for 3 years. He always gets pretty excited about it. He's pretty good at it. I mean, the lines are always straight when he's done. My only point of reference is the neighbor's house, and they rarely mow, so I'm pretty certain he's good at it.
My girlfriend and I do split up the chores. We don't share chores necessarily.
I do the dishes and the laundry. He likes it when I separate the lights and the darks, but he also likes it when I separate certain colors.
She does all the chores like washing the dishes, washing the clothes, mopping the floor, cleaning the toilet.
He likes it when he can't smell the toilet when he sits down.
Sweeping the garage, washing the windows, washing the mirrors.
Stuff like, you know, make the bed after we sleep in it, stuff like that. Everyday kind of stuff.
Turning the TV off, making sure all the light bulbs have been changed, weeding the garden.
Oh, I have to wax the floors once a month because we have all wood floors.
The chores I take care of are stuff like mowing the lawn, which is a really important duty. It's the first impression, really, that anybody has of the house is our yard, outside. You have to walk through it to get to our house. And all the stuff she does is great. You know, I really appreciate what she does, but I just don't see anything as important as mowing the lawn. My friend Hank, he's a musician. He's on his way over here today because he is looking for inspiration. He has a project and its deadline is coming up, he says, and he just needs and searches out inspiration in everyday life. And I said, hey, I'm mowing my lawn today. Why don't you come on down, see if it kickstarts anything. You know, I'm gonna be kickstarting my motor soon. Why don't you try to kickstart your songwriting by watching me?
I started a project called A Song a Month. I bought the URL, asongamonth.com, and every month I have to write a new song and post it online. And it's good inspiration for me to remain productive and creative. But you know, when it comes down to it, I find myself just rushing, and usually what I put up is just stupid. I mean, I don't know why I waste my time.
A lot of people listen to music when they mow. Me, I don't. I feel like I get a way better connection to the lawn and the mower if I can hear what's going on inside the mower. And I can actually hear when I listen and when I really get into a zone, I can hear the blades of grass going shunk, shunk, shunk really fast. I want to maintain a strict regimen of weekly mowings. I usually mow on a Thursday. Thursdays are a pretty good night for me.
He can mow every Thursday. We have a special meal on Thursdays to commemorate the day. Pork chops. It can be difficult, a little taxing on the relationship. Sometimes I think maybe he likes mowing more than he likes me, but it's like living with anyone who has a passion. It's a sacrifice you have to make to be with someone who feels passion, who can feel anything at all, really. In this day and age, I think it's a good, healthy attribute. And it's one of the reasons that I stay in this relationship.
Mark and I go back a long time, and yeah, I've seen him grow as a mower, from basically starting out in grade school and high school, basically just, you know, plucking weeds. He was always the best. He was the lawnmower boy. Everyone knew him as the lawnmower boy. And within the last couple of years, I think it's safe to say he has become the lawnmower man.
I tell you what, nothing feels better than this. This feeling right here. The lawn is mowed. The first mow of the year. I feel pretty good about this mowing season. After this mow today, I mean, I don't see how anything could go wrong. There was a pretty big anthill in the backyard. I'm gonna have to treat that later. It did hit the blades a little bit. I'm gonna check that out later though. The worst thing that could happen to me would it'd be raining on a Thursday and I'd have to push the mow back. It's like a game delay, you know? It's like baseball. It rains, it's gonna happen, and you just deal with it. Mowing's kind of like life in that way.
Hey, yo, to you mowers of the world, your duty is righteous, your flag is unfurled. Hey, yo, to you keepers of green, you're the perfect composite of man and machine. With the ethics of grass aside for now, I take great joy in watching you plow through the swaths of grass and the twigs and the trees. A sensuous beauty I'm brought to my knees. So hey, yo, to you mowers of the world, your duty.
All right, that was first mow. So, mockumentaries. What exactly is a mockumentary? If a documentary is different from a narrative in that it's about real life, it's not a scripted event, you're not telling a fake story. A mockumentary is a narrative film, it's a fictional film told using the style of a documentary. So some examples of what a mockumentary are, they kind of go back a ways. If you think back to, you probably heard of maybe in the 1930s when Orson Welles did his radio broadcast of War of the Worlds, which sent a lot of people into a panic because he used the style of an actual newscast. That's sort of an early example of what you might call a precursor to a mockumentary. The Beatles' A Hard Day's Night is one of the first film examples, feature-length film examples, where it's told in sort of a documentary style. Typically a mockumentary is something that's a comedy. It doesn't have to be, right? It can be something that's dramatic. It can be something that has sort of a social value to it. This is Spinal Tap is obviously a very popular example. Who here has seen This is Spinal Tap?
There you go. The rest
Awesome.
of you see it.
Yeah, turn that one up to 11. You got to see This is Spinal Tap. This is Spinal Tap came out in the 80s by Rob Reiner. It's one of the most popular, if not the most popular mockumentary, I would say, in popular culture. Rob Reiner around this time sort of popularized the term mockumentary. Really awesome one. If we want to move on to the next one. Blair Witch Project is an example of a mockumentary, or that's sort of in the style of a mockumentary. Some might call it docufiction or something else like that.
Yeah. And sort of the found footage.
Like a found footage thing. It's designed to look like it's real, but it's not. So Blair Witch Project is a really good example of it not having to be a comedy. Best in Show is another example from the Christopher Guest guys who do like Mighty Wind and those kind of movies. This one's about dog shows. Really great example of mockumentary. And then Borat, obviously, who is one of my favorites of the past decade. Is another really great example where it's told as if he's making a documentary for his home of Kazakhstan to bring home, to hopefully bring great wealth to them.
And that one has kind of, some elements. Obviously, he's playing a fictional character. It's constructed, but there's this candid camera dimension where many of the performers in the film are people caught unawares. They don't know at first that they're in this movie until after the camera stops rolling.
And Borat was really one of the first ones that really popularized it and really made good use of that in the mockumentary genre, as far as sort of tricking their subjects from time to time and using people who thought they were actually in a documentary versus using performers who were performing as if they were in a documentary. So, I mean, if we kind of maybe want to go on to the next slide and we can start to break down, since we don't have a whole lot of time here and we want to be able to get onto the 2 minutes in a few minutes. Sort of the techniques of the different phases of production when you're dealing with both a documentary and a mockumentary. And the nice thing is that since they share some of the same techniques, it's a lot of overlap. So in pre-production, choosing your subject, why don't we talk about how important subject is with documentaries?
Well, in the case of the IDC competition, you're not really supposed to do any kind of pre-production other than you're allowed to secure locations, which kind of invites the idea that you have a rough concept in mind of some possible types of movies you would shoot. But you're assigned a genre in the IDC. And that is helpful in a sense because you're kind of corralled into something. It narrows it down. But I think as you are preparing to make documentaries or mockumentaries of your own, you have to think, what do I have access to? What kinds of people do I know? And in particular, what are the most visually stimulating things that they do? Do you have a friend who has access to a certain kind of geographic space or equipment that is unusual, and that makes for, I think, for good topics.
And when choosing subject for a mockumentary, it's really helpful, like in the case of First Mo, where if the subject of the mockumentary would be something that would be so trivial, no one would actually make a documentary about it.
Right.
Unless you have a neighbor who is this into mowing their lawn, it's probably not going to be a real documentary. So a lot of really successful mockumentaries have a subject matter that's so trivial that no one would make a real thing about it.
But it's kind of like, real life exaggerated in a sense.
Sure,
I think if
absolutely.
you can say something about that.
Absolutely. I mean, it's the minutia of everyday life, and it's the stakes of the people involved. So for him, mowing his lawn is one of the most important things he could do. It's more important than all of the chores that his girlfriend does. It's what people see when they first come to the house, right? And when you're picking your subject for your mockumentary, you want to make sure that no matter how trivial it is, that the people who are involved with that subject don't find it trivial. To them, it's everything. It's almost life or death.
Yeah, so in terms, we moved on a little here to production technique. One of the things that goes back to my earlier comments about how documentaries are constructed just like narrative fiction is, would be the notion of the staging or reenactment. There's nothing wrong with using the notion of a reenactment. It's a common technique in documentary filmmaking, and it's almost kind of de rigueur in the mockumentary. And obviously, all filmmaking is staged in the sense that you have to go out of your way to get a camera and the people who are going to be in front of that camera to agree to be at a certain point, mutual place and time.
Yeah, and mockumentary, when you're dealing with staging and things like that, even though it's a fictional piece, you want it to sort of evoke the sense that this is not a fictional piece, that it's something that's happening in the moment. So it's something where you can have a script, you can have an outline, and even if you want to really fine-tune the words that you're saying, but it's a kind of a format where you're really encouraged, as we did, to basically come out with an outline and then have your performers improvise on camera.
Right.
Because that really makes a sense that it's in the moment, that it's not scripted, and it's a really nice way of using staging for that.
And that kind of brings up the idea of interviews. We heard our previous presenter talk about the notion of the talking head. And in First Mo, because these actors are improvising and kind of performing, using the talking head works really perfectly in that context. And if you noticed in the first movie that we watched, we didn't really use the talking head. The actual, the content of the interviews where they're discussing their relationship, we didn't even shoot that with a camera. We just recorded audio.
Yep.
And that was to challenge ourselves to kind of be a little more sophisticated in eliding or getting rid of the reliance on talking heads.
Just like the workshop with the storyboards earlier. I mean, talking heads are not very cinematic. You can have them in there, but that's not really using all the tools you have in your toolbox if that's all you're showing.
And on the topic of the use of archival material, obviously, if you're making documentaries or mockumentaries about family and friends, having access to old photographs, family documents, and things like that can really add a layer of sophistication to the movie making that is helpful. I make a lot of artist profiles. It's one of the hobbies, the niches in documentary movie making that I do. And I made one about a German animator named Angela Steffen, whose senior thesis project premiered at the Cannes Film Festival. And she was kind enough to just turn over all of her drawings, all of her storyboards, all of her material, all of her animatics, everything that showed how she ended up making this amazing movie. And because I had all that material, it was like half the work was done for me.
And the last bullet on there was sound. If you want to touch on maybe, with Hammer and the Axe, there was a lot of really interesting stuff with sound, and we'll get to post-production really quick. But sound, and it was said earlier today too, is almost in many ways more important than the video quality you have. Audiences, when they're watching a movie or of any kind, they're willing to forgive a certain amount of visual degradation because they're used to things like YouTube, and they're used to things like, scrambled cable and crappy images on TV. But if the sound is bad, it's going to take you right out of that movie, no matter what, if you're making a documentary or a mockumentary. And not all of it has to be in the moment too. I mean, you have a lot of leeway, which will kind of take us into post-production now, to handle and sort of create it in post.
Yeah, I mean, one of the differences for me between making fictional narrative and documentaries is that post-production in documentaries, you're sifting through material looking for those kind of propinquities, they call them sometimes in documentary filmmaking, those little moments that you maybe didn't plan for, that you can't script, and yet there they are, and sometimes those end up being the best. For instance, when we were shooting Hammer and Axe, Tim Jorgensen talked about losing his dad, and Tucker and I looked at each other. I knew when he said that, I didn't, it wasn't planned, but when he started talking about his dad, I knew that would form the relationship, kind of triangulate the relationship that he has with Doug, and it made I think really kind of makes the movie.
Sure, and that pretty much ties into finding the movie in post-production. It's one of the really interesting things that differentiates documentaries and even mockumentaries from regular scripted narrative, is that typically in a scripted Hollywood film you would have a set script, these scenes are in this order, this is exactly how the story comes out. But in documentaries especially, you're more or less you're going fishing, you're capturing a lot of footage, and then you're going into the post-production booth and you're saying, what sort of story can I write from this? Kind of like your example with the Hammer and the Axe and the story of Tim's dad.
Well, some people call it direct cinema. The idea that there isn't anything that's pre-planned and ordered in a certain way, that you're just capturing something as it happens. So we'll be. Oh, I forgot to put up this page we have some resources here too. If you can maybe go to the very last page. I don't know if Jim can do that up there for us, but we will be available to answer other questions you might have about documentary and mockumentary filmmaking, because we would certainly love to see yours that you would hopefully produce in the future. So I guess here Tucker's going to find it. The very last slide shows documentary.org is a great place. Tons of resources there. Doc Challenge is the annual event we mentioned. Kino Eye has dozens and dozens of references to other documentary resources online. And then Short of the Week, for all of you filmmakers, whether it's doc, mock, or narrative fiction, animation, experimental, music videos, whatever kinds of movies you like to make, Short of the Week is addicting. It's beautifully designed and has the most amazing films that you'll ever see, and they're all short. Thank you for.
If you get a chance, come to the screenings tonight. We'll be around if you ever want to pick our brains about anything or ask us any questions. We didn't have time for it today, so on with the 2 minutes.
Thank you.
Thank you, guys.
View this program again at freetv.org, on Community Access Channel 12, or order a copy, info@freetv.org or 258-8767.